Hello and welcome to the 2021 National Student Parent Support Symposium. My name is Lewis Pollard and I will be your moderator on today. I am excited to be and proud to be a patient navigator with the Dads to Be program, where we serve fathers who are expecting a child or have a child under the age of 1 here in Franklin County and in Montgomery County as well. I am excited about the next 2 hours that we get to spend with each other. The theme for this year's symposium is "And Still We Rise," setting the groundwork for parenting student empowerment. It is good to see all of our participants, our friends in the chat session saying good morning and hello to everybody. This session today, 9:30 to 11:30, is something that I am very, very excited about, as it is entitled Supporting Fathering Students. Supporting Fathering Students. We have 3 amazing organizations that are doing this in a successful way, and the way that our time, and I will introduce them as they come. Each one of them will be giving a presentation on the work that they are doing, giving us some expertise, some insight, and some information. And then I'm excited because after each organization presents their presentation, we're going to have about an hour at the end to do some Q&A, ask them some questions, get some direct answers from maybe your university, your program, the city that you serve. And we'll be able to not just ask some questions from us, but if you would like to ask a specific question from a specific individual, do us a favor and please go ahead and put your question in the comment section. I want to briefly go over the purpose of our time together over these next few hours. Furthering the intentions of the symposium, this event is motivated by improving the experiences, opportunities, and success of parenting students. Empowering these students is this year's theme. And it relates to empowering their expertise, ideas, advocacy, and potential for college and university inclusion, visibility, and support. Thank you for all the work that you do empowering our parenting students, and specifically our parenting fathers. We are getting ready to get into our presentations on today. So first, I would like to introduce to some and to present to others Mr. David Fluellen, all right? Mr. David Fluellen is the founder and CEO of the Dads to Be program, where I have the wonderful opportunity to serve, and the Urban Family Development Center. So he is the first presenter that we will have on today. So we're going to ask him to turn his mic on, share his screen, and we are excited to hear what Mr. Fluellen has to share with us on today.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Lewis, for that great introduction. We are extremely excited to be with you all today to talk about a topic very near and dear to my heart, and that is fatherhood. We definitely say good morning to everyone, and all of the practitioners that will be presenting today, many whom I've had an opportunity to work with right here in the state of Ohio. And so we're just excited to be with you all. And we want to say thank you to the university for extending an invitation for us to be here. Well, I am going to go ahead and begin to share my screen. As Lewis stated, feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, and we will get to those questions. If not, after the presentation, definitely there is some time set aside to answers those questions during the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and begin to share my screen and get this party started. Right. All right. So as I mentioned, my name is David Fluell, and I'm the founder and CEO of Urban Family Development Center, and Dads to Be. So who is Urban Family Development Center? Our mission is to provide tools and strategies to families and urban communities to aid in empowering them to overcome poverty, offering several programs that assist us with our two-generational approach. Our Family First program is one of our newer programs, designed to offer assistance with our families in helping them to develop what we call a family improvement plan. So it's focused primarily on family stabilization with the families that we serve here in Franklin County, helping them to identify career goals, helping them to identify financial goals, and just overall working with them to stabilize their families. Then, of course, our Dads to Be program, which we'll talk a little momentarily. And then Fresh Start. This is the foundation of our organization, if you will. This is how we begin to do this work back in 2015. And so it's a reentry program that we designed to offer skilled trade training to those reentering society. So yeah, we're really excited about Fresh Start that will be returning in the fall of 2021. So again, originally, our organizations was birthed off of the idea of working with restored citizens. In 2015, we took an alternative route, if you will. And well, let me say this: we were provided an opportunity to work in the space of fatherhood. Is my screen not sharing? I'm hearing someone. Is my screen not sharing? Let me go back. Screen share. Let's try this again. All right, somebody let me know, is my screen sharing?
It is.
Yes, we're good to go now. Thank you.
All right. There we go. So that was just an overview of the program. So as I mentioned, in 2015, we had an opportunity to develop a fatherhood program. The goal of that fatherhood program was to work towards providing fathers with prenatal education in attempts to lower the infant mortality rate here in Franklin County. I'm going to be honest with you all. Prior to the call, I had no idea what infant mortality was. I heard infant and I heard pregnant moms, and I really was not really excited about being a part of that. We did some homework, and I had to identify rather what infant mortality was. And so for those of us who may or may not know, infant mortality is the death of a baby before his or her first birthday. This is measured at a rate, the number of deaths per 1,000 live births. Leading causes for infant mortality is prematurity, babies being born too soon, low birth weight, babies being born too small, birth defects, sleep-related. Some of you all may have heard or seen a billboard or some type of marketing material mentioning the ABCs of safe sleep. And so we focus on the ABCs of safe sleep a great deal. And then maternal complications. These numbers are not the most recent numbers. We're still looking to update that, but these numbers still speak to the importance of the work that we do. This is an infant mortality ranking every week in Franklin County, and then also or every week in Franklin County, we see 2 times as many Black babies die, right? So we're 39th out of 50 states, 43rd out of 50 counties. When we look at fatherhood, we begin to look at this work and discover that we actually have a crisis here in the United States, across the globe, if you will. Fatherhood is a crisis. Absence of fathers in community is a big issue. 19.7 million children live in a home without a father. These children are more likely to have behavior problems, 4 times greater risk for poverty. They're more likely to commit a crime. They are more likely to face abuse and neglect, more likely to go to prison, and 2 times to drop out of high school. When we look at fatherhood and we look at the role and some of the challenges that they have, we see that they too deal with the social determinants of health. Some of the personal challenges include substance abuse, alcohol, unemployment, poverty, housing, transportation, food, legal aid, access to healthcare, including access to primary care, Medicaid, education, including GED and vocational training. And then one of the more common issues that our fathers face and deal with is child support payments. So what if we provided fathers with prenatal education and supportive services? So many organizations throughout Franklin County and here in the state at the time in 2014 or 15 rather, spent a lot of time, which we understand and rightfully so, working with mom. And again, mom carries the baby. We want to make sure that mom has a healthy birth outcome and a healthy pregnancy. But what if we focused resources and prenatal education to the dad? I'm confident that when dad is educated and when dad is involved, then the likelihood of mom having a successful pregnancy and a successful birth outcome, those chances increase. And so in 2014, we answered the call, 2000. So in partnership with the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, we received a 2-year grant to offer prenatal support to fathers of expecting mothers participating in a program here in Franklin County called Moms to Be. Moms to Be was a prenatal education program that was developed to offer prenatal support and services to moms. And so the idea was to invite dads to participate in those programming opportunities along with moms. The fatherhood programming, at the time, we offered it in 4 sites where infant mortality rates were the highest in Franklin County. We started offering programming in 4 sites with the help of our partnership with the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, Celebrate One, and Moms to Be. We now offer programming in 8 high-risk neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods deemed high risk by Celebrate One here in Columbus, Ohio, out of the mayor's office. So Dads to Be helps men in high-risk communities by offering education and guidance on prenatal care, maternal needs, family structure, and infant health. One of the great things about our program is extremely unique is that you see here, we have an opportunity to not only work with dads and offer fatherhood education to dads, but we get an opportunity to work with moms and dads in the same space at the same time. So here you see what we call brother-sister circle. When all of the families arrive, we come together in a circle This is usually an opportunity for us to, I guess in a sense, have an icebreaker, if you will. It's usually a question of the day followed by an educational moment, whether it's related to healthy eating or mental health. And so this is really one of the highlights of our programming, again, because it's an opportunity for moms and dads to come together and participate in programming at the same time. This particular site here is Grace Baptist Church. Another great thing about our programming that I'd like to highlight is that most or all of our sites are in partnership with churches in the community. And so it's always good to see the faith-based community joining forces with us as we look to improve the lifestyle of families right there in their communities. So once we have an opportunity to come together with moms and dads in the same space, then we split out into groups. That's the B Sessions content at a glance. So we get an opportunity again after the brother-sister circle. There is a session for parenting moms. There is a session for pregnant moms. And then of course, dads have a session as well. It's an opportunity for us to come together in a space specifically designed for us as dads to have conversations about simply how we become the best dad possible and the best partner as well. So again, some of the content at a glance: dads and prenatal care, dad's involvement in mom's prenatal care, of course, again, teaching dads the signs of labor, addressing social determinants of health. We are also have discussions and provide education on postpartum care, dads being informed on connecting with nurses and home visits. We have a phenomenal partnership with Mount Carmel, who does all of our home visiting. So dads have an opportunity to meet these nurses during the moms to be and dads to be sessions. And so when they come home with their baby and mom from the hospital, they've already met the home visiting nurses. They've already established a relationship with the nurses. They're aware of how important breastfeeding is and how to support mom during breastfeeding. And then of course, baby's first year group. So that's a group of us that come together and support mom, and us as dads support one another in supporting mom for that first year. Weekly group education curriculum. This is something that we focus on, not necessarily dealing with prenatal education, but we want to focus a bit on dad and how to help dad to become the best dad possible. Many of our fathers, unfortunately, grew up in a home without a father. And so in essence, we're asking these dads to do something that they've never seen done before. And so some of the topics that we discuss as it relates to education is the secret of creating safe and loving, stable, and nurtured families, positive discipline tools taught through a uniquely father-friendly method for successful child behavior management, effective family communication technique, the father and child and father and mother relationship, how to stop fighting and arguing by using proven effective strategies for conflict resolution and problem solving, and then how to achieve cooperation, I'm sorry, I can't talk this morning, and teamwork in family. And so in essence, we're providing these families with tools and strategies to have a healthy and successful family. How do you effectively communicate with your partner so that the end result is that you guys address the issue at hand, but do it in a healthy manner so that we are mindful that our children and other family members are watching. And we tend to do what we've seen done. And unfortunately, sometimes the way that we've seen problems being resolved is not usually a good philosophy or a good way to do that with our children. So I talked a little bit about breastfeeding with dads. This is something that we're really big on, is encouraging and educating our dads on why it's important for them to encourage mom to breastfeed and the benefits of that. Of course, so research on breastfeeding support has consistently identified fathers as an important source of support in the decision to breastfeed and its implementation. The literature indicates that father influences four aspects in particular: the breastfeeding decision, assistance at the first feeding. Mom is giving that first meal to the baby. It's very important that dad is there during that first feeding. Duration of breastfeeding, at-risk factors for bottle feeding. The US study reports that babies who are breastfed have a 21% lower risk of death in their first year compared with babies never breastfed. The reduction in risk rises to 38% if babies are breastfed for 3 months or more. And so this is statistical information that we provide our dads. We're not just telling you this because it sounds good and we want you to do it, but we want to make sure that dads have access to the resources and the data that supports breastfeeding. And we're so excited because we have dads that are very supportive of breastfeeding, that have played a role in breastfeeding with their partners. The impact of fatherhood engagement in pregnancy through child development is something that's really near and important to us as well. Numerous studies have shown that when fathers are present in their family, the impact can be significant in terms of early development, academic achievement, and the overall well-being of the child. A father's support can make a big difference even before their baby is born. And so researchers have found that when a father is involved before birth, his presence can potentially lower the risk of infant mortality in the first year. The influence is particularly relevant for African-American babies. And so again, I just want to drive home that we are real big on fathers being involved early on during the pregnancy of their child, and then of course during the birth and then thereafter. One of the other great benefits of our program at Dads to Be, again, I talked a little bit about it in the brother-sister circle, but once a month, we do a big lesson with moms and dads together. And these topics and lessons deal with parenting skills and co-parenting skills. And so again, we get an opportunity to talk about communication. You know, how do we effectively communicate together with our partner? We talk about goal planning and goal setting with moms and dads together. We talk about discipline. Parenting out of fear and violence is one of my topics that we discuss, where we get to have a conversation with our partners or our parents and helping them to understand how important it is that they develop tools and strategies and how to parent in the sense where we want our children to respect us rather than fear us. And so we talk about how is that a good way to discipline your child? Are there other strategies to utilize in regards to disciplining our children? We say it all the time. We learn how to parent based off of how we were parented, whether that was good or bad. We take the good and we take the bad, and we become the best parent possible that we see fit for our children. About being a parent, and we share this with our families all the time. The great thing about being a parent is that I get to choose the type of parent. I get to choose the parenting style that I want to use for my children. And I do not have to be the parent to my children that my father or my mother was to me. And so we're really excited about the opportunity that we get to spend time with our moms together in the same space at the same time and having conversations about family structure, family stabilization. It's one of the highlights. As you see there in the picture, moms and dads are together, the babies are there. It's just a really phenomenal opportunity. One of the other things that we were very intentional about when we formed our partnership with Moms to Be was, again, making sure that dads have access to the same content that moms have access to. And so we struggled at the beginning with getting dads there because they automatically associated the program with a room full of pregnant women and babies, and they weren't too excited about coming. And so we had to get creative with ways that we could get dads there. And on many occasions, most occasions, once dads arrive and they see that there are other dads there, and they see that the information is relative, they, on most cases, are excited and glad that they came. In fact, dads have told me, man, I'm glad that I came. At first, I wasn't excited. I didn't want to come, but I'm so glad that I came. Understanding the barriers. We deal with dads and dads from urban inner city communities sometimes come in with baggage. We all have baggage. But understanding the barriers of the dads that we work with is essential in us being successful in the work that we do. Although we are a prenatal education program, we aim at providing dads with education on how they support mom during pregnancy. But overall, we want dad to be successful. We want him to be a successful dad. We want him to be a successful father. And we want him to be a successful role model in his community. And that requires us to help him to overcome the barriers that are set before him. And so some of those barriers are experiencing the system that was designed to leave dad out. When you look at a lot of the systems such as Job and Family Services, and this is not a slap if there's anybody here on Job and Family Services, but in many cases, dads are not allowed to be involved on a case. If so, that income is included. A lot of times that then takes mom out of eligibility for services. And so he can't be in the house. You know, they do inspections, he's got to leave. And so those are some of the barriers that our dads deal with. Conflict with mom is another. A lot of times, unfortunately, our dads and moms, their intention was never to be together for a lifetime. They hooked up, they had a baby, and now they have to deal with each other for the rest of the baby's life. Even outside of the age of 18, those of us who have grown parent or have grown children know that we still have to parent those adult children. So helping dads to work through the conflicts that they experience with their partners. In some cases, they're no longer with their partner. And so helping them with co-parenting. Conflict with previous partners. Again, co-parenting is something that a lot of our dads deal with, not being able to see their child, having child support issues. If you're not paying child support, you can't see your child. We hear a lot of our dads say that about their partners. And so helping dads to work through that, helping dads to navigate through the child support system and even filing for visitation rights, helping dads with the rearages are some of the barriers that we assist dad with when you talk about conflict with previous partners. And then misunderstanding the legal rights, their legal rights. A lot of dads don't know that they have legal rights. They figure because mom had the baby, they have no rights at all, which is in fact not true. Mom is, in most cases, if you are not on the birth certificate or you're not married, mom is the custodial parent, but you still have rights as a father. And so helping dads to understand their rights and even going down and helping dads to establish paternity. Addressing food insecurities. We're really excited because once a month pre-COVID, we have a partnership with this food bank here in Franklin County, and they come out to all 8 of our sites once a month. and our dads and moms get an opportunity to get fresh produce from the services or from Middle Ohio Food Bank. And this is something that's really great for our dads to be able to participate in, especially for dads that are in between jobs, for dad to be able to go out, bring in some groceries and assist with picking those groceries up and taking them home, makes dad feel a part of the process, which is what we strive to do. Another great aspect of our program is we always encourage dads to participate in prenatal visits to the hospital with mom, being a part, asking questions during doctor visits, understanding what mom's body is going through. And so once a month, Nationwide Children's Hospital and their care center comes out. Actually, Ohio State now has their own care unit that comes out. But dads get an opportunity to participate in these visits. As you can see here, one of our families, one of our dads here is participating in a visit there with his child at the care center. How has it been successful? Dads report feeling more involved and connected to other dads, which is great to be able to be a part of a program in a space where other dads are simply working toward the same goal, and that's just to be a best dad, of space to be able to come in and talk about things that's related to dads is always a great atmosphere and a great space for our dads, and they look forward to it every week to be able to come into a space. And in many occasions, this is unfortunately one of the only positive spaces that these men get an opportunity to enter into for that week. Of course, this is unfortunate, but we're excited and we're thankful that we get to provide that space for them. Moms report a better relationship with their parenting partner. Moms are so excited to see that dad is actually a part of this process. So many times mom feels like she's going through the pregnancy and dealing with everything by herself. What our program does is it allows dads and moms to go through this process together, and moms report a better relationship with parenting partners. We've connected with over 427 dads. We've documented over 93 successful birth outcomes. Dads report feeling more confident and knowledgeable about birthing process and parenting in general. I'll never forget, one of our dads came back to session after a visit with him and mom to the doctor's office, and he was just so excited that he knew the questions to ask. He demanded that the doctor included him in the conversation. And it was just so amazing because he shared with me before that he had gone to a doctor's appointment and he felt like that the doctor did not include him, that the doctor did not recognize him in the room and in the space. But on this visit, he demanded that the doctor understood and recognized him in the space, and not in a mean or harshful way, but simply by asking questions and asking for clarity during the doctor's appointment. We've linked dads to employment services. So we want to make sure that our dads have opportunities not only to get a job, but we're really big on helping our dads to identify a career path. It's one thing to go to work, and we know that we got bills to pay, and we know that we have to make ends meet, as my aunt would say, but we want our dads to think long term, and we want our dads to provide for their families, but we also want them to think about, what's my purpose? What am I put here to do? What can I do to add to the betterment of society and the betterment of families? We've assisted dads with establishing paternity, again, and gaining visitation rights. So these are some of the ways that our programming has been successful. Some of the highlights of our program, again, our dads are confident. 100% of our dads displayed a higher level of confidence in their knowledge of how to care for a healthy baby. A lot of dads are scared out of their mind just at the thought of holding a small infant baby. And so we have what we call boot camps for new dads, where we go through how to care for an infant, how to change a diaper, how to pass a diaper, how to pass a baby rather, successfully, and how to make a bottle. What do I do with the baby when the baby has been fed, the baby's diaper is changed, but the baby is just continuing to cry? You know, how do I help, and what role do I play coming home from the doctors or the hospital once the baby is home? So 100% of our dads are confident upon completion of our program in regards to their knowledge of how to care for a healthy baby. We're big on safe sleep. Over 90% of our dads are now currently practicing or plan to practice the ABCs of safe sleep: alone, on the back, and in the crib, right? Safe sleep is a big focus of dads to be and Celebrate One, our big partners here in Franklin County as well. Enforcing that their baby, again, making sure that mom doesn't fall asleep after she breastfeeds the baby with the baby on her chest. Making sure that if mom is tired at night, that he's up to talk to her, to make sure that she doesn't just lay the baby down right next to her in the bed because she's really sleepy, she's really tired. And so again, just making sure that dads are informed on safe sleep practices. Again, parenting and child involvement. 10% of our dads obtain knowledge on how to establish paternity. So again, not necessarily with the partner that they're participating in the programming with at Dads to Be, but with previous partners as well. Is your name on the birth certificate? And going through, we actually have a mock birth certificate that we use in our sessions to show dad where he signs, what is included on the birth certificate, making sure that dad has his ID at the hospital, because if dad doesn't have his ID, then they won't let him sign it. So we want to make sure that dads are aware of how to obtain and establish paternity. All right, I feel like I've been talking forever, so I am going to be quiet at this moment, and I don't know that we have time for questions. If not, if we do, I can't see anything but my screen. So somebody let me know, do we have time for questions, or are we moving on?
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Flewellen. Yes, we are going to do questions. We're going to do questions during the panel discussion. So if you do have a question for Mr. Flewellen as it pertains to the Dads to Be program, I love as far as some of those barriers that fathers face and having to overcome them, and really the importance of dad's role in baby arrives, but in the pregnancy stage as well. As somebody who serves under Mr. Flewellen and a part of this amazing, as great as the work as it sounds, it's even better than that. So I'm excited to work for Mr. Flewellen and the Dads to Be program. And we're going to hear from him more during our panel discussion. So if you have any questions, please write those down, put them in the chat box there, and we will address all of those at the end during our panel discussion. Up next, we have a group. We have Dr. Matissa Wilbon, who is a part of Fathers Incorporated. She will be coming now and sharing her screen and to us as well. Dr. Wilbon, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so glad to be here with you all this morning. It was really great to hear Mr. Flewellen's presentation as well. Very exciting to hear all that they're doing with Dads to Be. I'm excited to be presenting with today well, I'm presenting with my partner. Let me just say this, with my husband and my partner, Mr. Lawrence Wilbon. He's going to be on the panel, but I am actually presenting right now, and I'm going to give you some background on Fathers Incorporated and talk about some of the work that we're doing, and then he's going to be part of the panel discussion. So any questions that you would have, you could certainly put them in the Q&A feature. You can ask them then. I won't be there, but we work in partnership. So I'm really glad to be here with you all today. I think this symposium is important. It is an important topic as we talk about fathers. And I want to talk a little bit about Fathers Incorporated, but specifically talk about some work that we're doing around fathers, and specifically talk about a think tank that we've created as we're doing research and thinking about fathers. So Fathers Incorporated was founded 17 years ago by our CEO, Mr. Kenneth Braswell. And really the mission is to engage, to equip, and to empower a network of fathers. The goal, and we certainly saw this with Dads to Be, is to really create a community so that fathers feel that they have peers that they could go to, that they have practitioners who will work with them, but that they will be ultimately empowered to be the fathers that they want to be, actually. And so this is done through, of course, a supportive environment. And I'm sure Lawrence will talk a little bit more about this during the discussion. There's parent education. There are other opportunities for fathers to come together. There's a literacy program called Real Dads Reads, where fathers are really encouraged to read with their children rather, because we know literacy matters, and we know the more fathers are involved in their child's reading and school activity, that there are certainly positive outcomes there. There is, again, direct parent training, and then there's capacity building. So let me get into the presentation and tell you a little bit about what we're doing. We really feel like it's important at Fathers Incorporated to really lift fathers up, to lift up responsible fatherhood in the ways that Mr. Llewellyn talked about with Dads to Be, but really also to spend time highlighting those things that really are barriers to father success. What we do know, according to research, or sort of all of those statistics that say when fathers are absent, there are negative outcomes. But what we also like to really focus on at Fathers Incorporated is the idea that fathers are also assets, so that the more they're involved, the more positive the outcome. And we want to spend time using sort of that asset-based framing to think about what fathers say about how they want to be involved. Are fathers really involved? So these are the kinds of questions that we're asking currently. What's different about today's dad, right? We know data and have heard data for years back in thinking about the image of the absent father. But what do today's fathers look like? What have we learned by working with dads themselves? We know that there's lots of social research and lots of practitioners and others who look at statistics and project some of the things that we know statistics show, and we could certainly point to those things, but what are dads saying themselves? How is current programming failing the modern dad? What are some of the hot button issues that we really need to focus on as it relates to modern day fathers? How then can we make sure that we're revising and adjusting our programs to benefit them? And then lastly, how can we glean about the future? What can we glean in terms of what we've learned and how to help fathers? So this is our starting point. We have created a report that we call the Blueprint, Reimagining the Black Father. Again, we have years of data that have created narratives around Black fathers in particular, but we wanted to really go back and look at not just the research, but think about what are those barriers that would shift our thinking about Black fathers, that would really progress us and push us into the future in a way that will help and uplift fathers, so that then in turn it will uplift families. So we want to look at the evolution of Black dads, and we're doing that. And I want to talk about a particular project again. It's called the Blueprint. It's a document that I authored with Mr. Braswell and another one of our researchers. And I want to just say at the outset that we're going to talk about a number of different areas that are structural in nature. Mr. Llewellyn talked about this, these barriers. From our perspective, in particular with this work, we think it's important to outline what these structural barriers are so that we could get a better understanding of why perhaps we don't see fathers as involved as we would like, but then also to juxtapose that with statistics on how fathers are involved. So one of the overarching questions that we asked as we started this particular research was this question of, why does poverty look like me, right? So why do we see not only dads, these barriers with fathers, but why do we see this connection with class, connection with poverty? Why do we see this intersection of race and class? And what does that mean for our fathers? Our mission then was to address the question of poverty, but then also to think about other areas as it relates to fathers, to think about how it is that we can make real policy recommendations, right? So that not only can we uncover those root causes, but that now those things will be the focus as we start to reimagine Black fathers. The goal of the blueprint was not only to sort of see those root causes, to come up with those solutions, to make policy recommendations, but to really create this innovative, technologically cutting edge network. And that's what we're in the process of doing. I'll talk about this more at the end, so that we can really address fathers, right? If we continue doing the same thing that we've always done, then of course we're going to get what we've always gotten. But if we really think about this from a new perspective, and maybe not as new, but really focus on some of those structural areas, we believe that we can come to some better solutions as it relates to fathers. So I'm going to turn my attention to the work that we've been doing over the last year and a half. And I want to talk specifically about the pillars of the blueprint as you see here on your screen. And I'm going to talk about each of these one at a time. What some of us know, or perhaps some of us do not know, 2020 marks the 55th anniversary of the 1965 Moynihan Report. Now, the Moynihan Report was written by a sociologist by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He served as the Assistant Secretary of Labor under President Lyndon B. Johnson. And this is important for us as we think about this work, because it was very controversial at the time. To be honest, it remains controversial for some even now. In this report, Moynihan argued that combating poverty required strengthening families in the United States. And he specifically was talking about Black families, right? What made it controversial, however, is that he really focused on some of the stereotypes that led the day, and dare I say, that still lead the day, right? That there is this pathological, inherent challenges within Black dads that make them not present. Now, even though he was the Assistant Secretary of Labor and really wanted to focus on jobs, the underpinning or the framework of the report really pointed towards individualistic, stereotypical ideals that people already had. So a lot of folks dismissed what Moynihan had to say. We resurrected the report and the thinking because if you move beyond some of those stereotypes and you really focus on structure, on barriers that Moynihan would not have known, nor did he address in the report, we believe that we could really get somewhere. So what, again, made this controversial was the fact that Moynihan really focused primarily on family structure. That's what he said was the primary cause of racial inequality. But he really failed to identify factors that related to systemic issues, factors like the one on your screen. Those believing Moynihan's assertions would point to Black people as the cause, and therefore the only necessary solution to our own problems. The blueprint argues, however, this document that we're working on, as have many critics since 1965, that Moynihan ignored the overarching ramifications of systemic inequalities like racism, like the impact of mass incarceration, the damaging consequences of the heroin and crack epidemics, disparities in the healthcare system, and the effect of the Vietnam War on Black soldiers, among other things, that would impact Black fathers and subsequently Black families. Now, it's been over 5 decades since this report, and research suggests that there is still little to no progress made on those key issues impacting the Black family. The reality is, in 2021, many of the concerns for Black families highlighted by the Moynihan report and subsequent research are now worse and are prevalent among all families, not just Black families. Still, the issues among racially marginalized communities are stark. And an overarching question asked by those residing in those communities, as I said at the outset, is this: why does poverty look like me? Enter the blueprint. What is the purpose of the blueprint? I mentioned this before. What does it mean to reimagine the Black father? Well, the purpose of the blueprint is to address those questions implicit in the report so that our conversation can truly be elevated to include the overarching and intersecting factors that impact the Black community and Black fathers. Additionally, the blueprint argues that to understand the Black family, one has to unpack the narrow and often stereotypical images and stories bestowed on Black fathers by understanding how they fit in a context of systemic inequality. In other words, the blueprint attempts to understand the plight of Black fathers in light of structural and institutional barriers, and to demonstrate that the lives and trajectories of Black fathers and their families can be positively changed. Therefore, there are 8 areas identified in this report that we believe, if addressed, would radically change the trajectory of the Black father and would thereby positively impact Black families. Reimagining the Black father is to promote fatherhood, to promote and uplift and elevate fatherhood, improve and eliminate these negative stereotype of Black fathers, especially low-income fathers, and to address these 8 key areas. And again, I want to talk about them very quickly. Number 1, we must address economic opportunities and entrepreneurship for Black men. Research suggests that Blacks have lower rates of upward mobility and higher rates of downward mobility than whites, leading to large income disparities that persist across generations. These findings are especially substantial for men. Understanding racial wealth disparities as an intergenerational issue is paramount to understanding how to sustainably reduce this gap. Today, listen to this: the typical white family has 10 times the wealth of the typical Black family and 7 times the wealth of the typical Latinx family. The impact of this, as we know, is far-reaching. We only have to examine the response to COVID-19, this pandemic, to see that many Black families found themselves vulnerable and unable to maintain their households because they had little to no liquid assets. So what's a way to positively impact these disparities? Entrepreneurship. This is an area in which policymakers and researchers should focus in the Black community. Entrepreneurship among Black communities in the 21st century remains a viable means by which African Americans advance. In 2018, for example, there were nearly 2.6 million Black-owned businesses in the US. This is a possible game changer, carving out a space for African Americans to get ahead despite systemic barriers such as denial of loans, occupational segregation and discrimination, and creating platforms and networks that support Black entrepreneurship. That's important to potentially lifting Black fathers and Black families out of poverty. Secondly, the second thing to be addressed to reimagine Black fathers is education. Education has long been touted as an important and powerful pathway for closing the racial wealth gap. When reimagining the Black father, we have to reimagine the Black student. We must address these issues, those issues that will bolster his ability to obtain a degree, that will yield a good paying job so he can accumulate and pass on intergenerational wealth. We've got to create policies and plans that will increase third grade proficiency in math and reading, thereby disrupting the school to prison pathway. Black fathers have to be educated to help their children in school. We must increase their parenting capacity. Increasing parenting capacity among Black fathers provides them with access to the economic and social capital needed to handle the rigors of parenting their children through school. When it comes to college, we must help close the completion gap. And we know this is huge for Black males. Males of color who don't attend credible four-year universities must overcome challenges like adaptability to college culture, being adequately remediated to do well in college courses, and receiving necessary supports from college staff. Those are all hindrances to college completion for Black students. Black and Hispanic students are 3 times more likely to attend a for-profit college than white students. Students who attained for-profit colleges report lower satisfaction of their college experience, more college debt, and a higher likelihood of defaulting on school loans upon graduation. So educational policy should include providing male students of color academic enrichment programs, cultural supports, training development, and mentorship that will assist them in graduating, obtaining a good paying job, and ultimately helping their families get out of poverty. The third area to be addressed is family structure. We need to re-examine policies that drive fathers out of the home and create a system where females heading households are not only dependent on government benefits, but are discouraged from marrying their partners. For example, welfare and child support policies have persisted over time that discourage father presence and become the impetus for marital dissolution. This has been especially true for Black families. Benefits became more substantial and were contingent upon fathers not being in the home. Specifically, marriage to a working man would result in decreases in benefits. Welfare expansion then would become a major contributor to the decline in marriage among Black communities where marriages were once strong. So rather than pushing policies like the success sequence that conveniently frames structural inequalities like high unemployment, like lack of education, as matters of individual choice barriers, we have to think about the structural inequalities that need to be removed for the success of Black families. Reimagining the Black father is understanding that physical separation is not always synonymous with the lack of father involvement or fatherlessness. Co-residence creates opportunities for engagement, yes, but men can live in the home and still be disengaged, while those who live outside of the home can be very involved. So what does fatherlessness then truly mean? It might not always be about living arrangement, but really thinking about true father absence. So policymakers, researchers, and practitioners reimagining Black fathers should create policies that incentivize positive relationships between mothers and fathers, especially those who may not be married. Systems of welfare and child support should not create disengagement, but rather opportunity for parent significant and sustained parental success, rather, despite marital status. Finally, these policies should destigmatize single motherhood and remove policies that incentivize fathers' absence in the household. Very quickly, number 4, the fourth area to be addressed is the labor market. Black workers face systemically higher unemployment rates, fewer job opportunities, lower pay, poorer benefits, and greater job instability. We know that there's discriminatory practices and systemic barriers when it comes to fathers trapped in jobs that are likely to pay lower wages. Policymakers have to delve into the complexity of Black male workers in the labor market and their ability to gain assets. Narrowing the race wealth gap then will be the result of both micro and macro level changes. Black workers at the micro level should be encouraged and trained to obtain degrees that will yield good paying jobs, be created, in the primary sector. Additionally, policies must be created that address the systemic discriminatory practices that keep Black male workers in dead-end, low-paying jobs. Health is the fifth area to be addressed. One factor rarely addressed that's significant to the financial well-being of Black males is health disparities, and that's physical and mental. Poor health is often symptomatic of poverty. Health, in turn, has an impact on sustained poverty. So we see this continual feedback loop. Research is clear that Black men experience more negative health outcomes than other groups. Statistics highlight that the leading causes of death among African American men include heart disease, cancer, stroke, etc. Illnesses often result in a rise in healthcare costs and medical bills. If we look at the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, for example, it absolutely exposed healthcare inequities in America experienced by Black families. According to the CDC, Black people constitute about 13% of the population, but made up about 23% of all COVID-19 deaths as the result of pre-existing conditions, lack of access to care, etc. Understanding mental health is important when reimagining Black fathers. Researchers have noted a correlation between adverse child experiences, or ACEs, and things like anxiety, depression, substance abuse. All of these things increase the risk of negative parenting or perhaps no involvement by fathers at all in the lives of their children. Why is this important? Because when we identify and address signs of mental health challenges early, it can actually strengthen the bond between fathers and their children, and in turn act as protective factors, bolstering resilience within fathers. Utilizing an asset-based approach, researchers should really seek to identify the inherent strengths of Black fathers. We know the challenges, we know the negative statistics, but we should highlight those characteristics that may buffer these challenges. Likewise, policymakers should seek to create policies that would provide the necessary networks and supports for affordable mental care needed, health care needed for Black fathers. Number 6 of 8, technology. African Americans frequently consume technology, but have not largely been able to reap the same economic benefits of the technology industry as their white counterparts. According to the State of Black America and their 2018 report, that they suggest that despite their role as consumers, African Americans do not have the same access to jobs in the tech industry and STEM, right? They don't have the same access, rather, to jobs in these fields, despite the fact that they're most likely to use smartphones and to utilize social media platforms. So reimagining the Black father means that policymakers must focus on specific industries like the tech industry as vehicles by which low-income Black fathers and their families can be lifted out of poverty. Number 7, the media. The media plays a large role in how Blacks are viewed in society. According to sociologist Patricia Hill Collins, these controlling images shape our thinking about certain groups after being exposed to negative representations repeatedly. For example, Blacks are overrepresented as perpetrators of violent crime in news coverage as compared with arrest rates, but underrepresented in the more sympathetic roles of victim or law enforcer. Why does that matter? These myths are pervasive within societal thinking, and left unchecked, they can make policy and lawmakers unsympathetic to the plight of Black dads. Similarly, in the US, Black families represent 59% of the poor in the media, but make up just about 27% of the poor in the general population. White families, on the other hand, represent 17% of the poor in the media, but make up 66% of the poor across the country. Continually framing Black families as poor and Black fathers as overly aggressive and violent contributes to a societal response that is both unsympathetic and unforgiving. Conversely, showcasing Black families as thriving with mothers and fathers who care about the well-being and success of their children creates an entirely different and positive narrative that could ultimately lead to more positive policies and outcomes. Finally, number 8 is simply hope. This is the final factor to be considered in shaping the blueprint to reimagining the Black father. Hope, optimism, resilience, all of these things are largely regarded as important for youth. However, it is imperative that researchers and policymakers consider the importance of hope in response to stressors experienced by African American men. Racism, we know, has a negative impact on the mental, emotional, and physical health of people of color. Hope as a coping mechanism can mitigate the impact of stressors related to everyday life, thereby reducing the impact of stress. Policymakers then should focus on creating opportunities for Black men to be strengthened by increasing their hope and encouraging those who are connected to a faith community to continue participating in faith-building activities. In conclusion, reimagining the Black father is more important than ever. The world is demanding positive change, and Black fathers need to be at the helm. If Black fathers are lifted, Black families are lifted. But this necessary change will not happen if, like Moynihan, society simply places the blame on them. Rather, it must mean that as America looks inwardly at how she can be better as a nation, that we use this blueprint to take into consideration what changes need to be made in society related to economic opportunity, to entrepreneurship, to education, to family structure, the labor market, health, technology, the media, and hope, at the same time that we work to build the character and resolve of Black men. It means affirming Black fathers and Black lives in order to lift Black fathers. So we really believe that if we focus on these pillars, if we do more than explore them, but we absolutely make and take up these policy recommendations, that we'll see the positive shift that we all are looking for. The last couple of things that I want to note as I end is the fact that when we think about Black fathers, you know, again, there are many statistics that point to the negative involvement, but this is what we hear from Black dads themselves. We do a lot of focus group and other kinds of research at Fathers Incorporated. And what we know from Black fathers is that for many of them, parenting is central to their identity. Dads see that, and they are just as likely as moms to say that parenting is extremely important to their identity. So rather than continually focusing on those statistics that suggest father absence is running rampant, one thing that we want to do in this portion of our work is to really uplift those ideas that dads want to be dad, and it is important to their identity. When we think about other facts related to dads, generally speaking, 57% of those surveyed say that parenting is extremely important to their identity. 54% say that parenting is rewarding all of the time, and 46% say that parenting is enjoyable. So this notion that dads don't want to be there, or particularly that Black dads just aren't there, it's important for us to note that there is a converse narrative out there. In 2016, there was research that suggested that fathers reported spending on average 8 hours a week on childcare. We see that that's tripled in time based on comparisons between 1965 and 2016. So fathers are increasingly more involved in childcare, and we need to highlight that, right? When we think about work-life balance for dads report that it's challenging for them as well, right? That just like mothers, many of today's fathers find it challenging to balance work and family life. So when we think about how to reimagine fatherhood and reimagining the Black father in particular, thinking about ways to help with this work-life balance is also just as important. About half of working dads, 52%, said in 2015 that it was very or somewhat difficult to do so in terms of this work-life balance, versus 29% who said that they always feel rushed. So this is an area in reimagining the Black father that we can look at. We also see that fathers are parts of households where they are not, you know, the sole breadwinner anymore, but how can we make sure again that there are those positive relationships both within those households, or if the father isn't the residential father, that they still can partner with their children's mother to make sure that there are positive relationships and that we're highlighting the fact that they are part of them. So how do we continue to elevate this conversation? Continue to deploy positive images. Focus not on just on quantity, how much time is spent, but think about quality time as well. Take time to really listen to dads, right? It's important to start to disaggregate some of the statistics and think about who those statistics represent. Seek opportunities to be intentional about reaching dads, uplift the essential importance of dad, and of course, lastly, really thinking about how it is that we focus on structure. I want to go back really quickly as I end. Part of what we're doing at Fathers Incorporated, and as one arm of it, is we created what is now called the Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy. And the real goal of this think tank, of this institute, if you will, is to do research like the blueprint. We've had a couple of town halls and a number of different forums that speak to some of the specific elements of the blueprint, to really uplift and highlight these findings and think about what that will mean for policymakers, academics, and practitioners. Our founding board, our advisory board, is listed here. All of these fellows are academics, some are practitioners, others are researchers, and all of us really are about the business of highlighting fathers and doing research around this really important work. If you're interested in the blueprint, if you're interested in Fathers Incorporated, all of the information is here on the screen. Again, my partner, Mr. Lawrence Wilbon, will be part of the panel. So if you have specific questions, you're more than welcome to address those to him. And he can also tell you how to contact me. Thank you for your time today. This work is extremely important. I'm grateful and honored to be a part of it. Enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Wow. Thank you so much for that information, Dr. Wilbon. It was a phenomenal balance of truth and inspiration. And I'm so grateful for that. Those pillars of the blueprint, I'm sure we're going to get into some of that during our panel discussion as well. Well, we have another amazing organization that is getting ready to present for us. And then after their presentation, we will get into the panel discussion. So some of those questions that you may have had for Mr. Fuellen, Dr. Wilbon, or some of our up and coming presenters, please get those ready. You can place those in the chat. You can place those in the Q&A box, and we will hit those momentarily. Up next, we are excited to bring to our virtual stage here Mr. Calvin Williams and Mr. Harold Howard from Lucian Family. So they are getting ready to take us further. And the presentation now, well, the moment now is in you all's hands. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Louis. And hello, good morning to all of our attendees, participants, and presenters. Listening to Dads to Be and Fathers Incorporated was very, very enlightening and inspiring. But I have to own a little bit of Ohio bias here. I'm really proud of Dads to Be because they're a part of a great fatherhood infrastructure, a statewide infrastructure that I think is best in the country. So shout outs to Dads to Be in Ohio. Much love to Fathers Incorporated. So yes, I'm Calvin Williams. Let me share my screen here. And I expect glitches like everybody else. So let's see here. Screen share. And get up here from the beginning. All right, here we go. So Calvin Williams, certified lactation consultant. I'm joined by my colleague, Harold Howard. We are with Lucian Families. Lucian Families is a company that's based in Cincinnati, Ohio. We work with organizations around Ohio and around the country, organizations that serve fathers, mothers, parents, couples. We also do quite a bit of work in the fatherhood and breastfeeding space around the country as well. Harold Howard and I have a combined 40 years of fatherhood practitioner experience. And as I stated, we really enjoy being a part of Ohio's fatherhood infrastructure with the Commission on Fatherhood, the Ohio Practitioners Network on Fathers and Families, and all the organizations like Dads to Be in Ohio that make up this beautiful fatherhood community. So we're gonna talk to you about three things: the development of fathers, the unique needs of expectant and parenting student fathers. That's a term that I coined to really hone in on what we're talking about here. And then community resources for expectant and parenting student fathers. I put expectant and parenting student fathers because a lot of times when a woman is pregnant, we don't consider the father as being expecting. But in the world that I inhabit, fathers are indeed expecting, and maybe we'll shed some of that light on you today in terms of how we can look at it that way. All right. So those are the three things we're going to talk about. And I will tell you, with as much time as Harold and I have spent in the fatherhood practitioner arena, whenever we're engaging an audience that is seeking to establish fatherhood programs or fatherhood services, such as this audience here looking to establish or strengthen services to parenting students who are fathers on campuses, we take it upon ourselves as die-hard practitioners to make sure people understand the basics or the basis of why we need to pay attention to and focus on fathers. So doing this work for so long, there are people who are still, even though the field is now 20, 25 years old, there are still people who are still just entering into the space of paying attention to, much less serving dad. So we're going to take a look at some foundational information that to me is the heart of the work, right? The heart of the work is how we value dads, right? And why to value dads. And so let's go. Looking at the development of fathers, I'd like to go back to evolution, right? Because I think it's really that important to understand this as a basis for the value of fathers in our communities, in our families. So first thing, evolution does not leave things to chance, right? It's going to evolve a set of adaptations, both physical, neurological, biological, to prime men to be good at fatherhood, the same as it primes women to be good at motherhood, right? So evolution, I think it's about the last 500,000 years where we saw this, what essentially was a phenomenon of the investing father, is what the anthropologists call it. The investing father, the father that invests time and energy and care and attention into their children, because prior to that, fathers were not, right? So evolution doesn't leave things to chance. So it absolutely primes and works and has evolved men to be investing fathers in their children's lives. The second thing is that evolution saw fit to produce this very rare phenomenon of the investing father. And to do so, it created the changes in hormones the genetic underpinning to their parenting. So men do undergo structural changes as they prepare to become fathers. Structural changes in the brain that help them neurochemically and neuroanatomically to be the fathers that their children need them to be. And the third thing about evolution is it hates redundancy. And how this applies to fathers is that evolution is obsessed with energy and how it distributes that energy within a life course. So it doesn't see fit to evolve two roles which are exactly the same. So it's actually required for the survival of the child. The two roles that are exactly the same are not required for the survival of a child. So evolution has created these differences, this investing father to co-join this investing mother, but both of them have different roles, right? Or else evolution would have just made men and women the same as it relates to parenting children. But no, that's a very, very deep basis for how fathers are different, why fathers are important, and why we need to pour resources, services, and attention into fathers when we're thinking about family strengthening and the health and well-being and life opportunities for children. So evolution, as we talked about, brings fatherhood into the neurobiological, neurochemical, and hormonal factors that are evolutionary in nature. So fathers get many of the same rushes that mothers do from parenthood, but the payoff depends on proximity and interaction, right? So as we get into this work on campuses around the country to serve fathers, we have to understand that when fathers are not connected to their children, the evolutionary machinery, the evolutionary vents in their nature, in their brain, are less likely to fire off, right? And so that's how we get in society messages such as, well, this guy or that guy doesn't want a father, or this guy or that guy is not a good father. What we really need to be thinking about is during pregnancy and after labor and delivery, is that father and child connected? Do they have an opportunity to connect so that the father's natural evolutionary installed machinery can get to work? Dr. Kyle Pruitt is one of the early and really most important fatherhood researchers from when this field first started. And in his book, Father Need, he absolutely demonstrates through research that children need fathers and fathers need children, and that the greatest fear for both is that they will be separated. So when we're thinking about helping, serving, supporting expectant and parenting student fathers on college campuses, we need to think about how is this father connected to, how close is he to, and how much interaction does he have with his child? So all of these things we're thinking and talking about could play a role in whether or not that father is able to progress through his studies and advance towards the degree that he's trying to achieve so he can take care of himself and his family into the future. So again, foundational information to consider. Another thing to think about are the dimensions of a father. We're used to thinking of fathers in one dimension. Well, what we offer is fathers really have three dimensions, right? There's the human, the person, right? There's his conception or ideas about the role to start forming in pre-adolescence. And then there's the parenting behaviors that is the father ring. So often we're looking at fathers in one dimension. And what we encourage is to break that out a little bit. Look at fathers in the three-dimensional framework that we're offering and ask yourself, are the services that we are building or already providing or plan to provide, which dimension are they aimed at? Which dimension should they be aimed at? Is it all three? And so we back up further to ask an even more fundamental question. Do we consider men to be good fathers when they're operating out of just one dimension, right? Or do we, as service providers and supporters for fathers, do we consider ourselves as being effective when we are serving dads with our mindset focused on just one dimension, right? So this father, this human being, this person has all, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but he has a whole lot that has been, that he's been through, that he's been engaged with through conception, through development in the womb, through birth, and all the things that can go well and not so well, and particularly for fathers who are low income or in poverty, right? And then the father's conception about the role. What does he think about being a father? That is worth investigating, or at least including in how we think about the services we're going to provide for these fathers. And then the fathering, the parenting behaviors. What are the things that he does? What are the things that we could provide that would help him do the things that he wants to do, so he can be the father he wants to be? So again, looking at fathers and fatherhood, breaking it out into 3 dimensions. So looking at how fathers develop at a micro level. So babies are born, boys are born. So you have a host of factors that can play a role in how that child is going to develop in the early years. So you have culture, you have adverse childhood experiences, nurturance. We now have information about what happens in zip codes that some people are born into versus others. The environment in the neighborhood, the family, brain development, 0 to 3, 0 to 5. Family of origin, what's the socioeconomic status, what's the attitudes around discipline and those type of things, and resources. What resources is this baby born into? So this boy who's heading into fatherhood, which research shows that there's about 80% of men 15 years old and up who are fathers. So this boy heading into fatherhood is traversing this terrain, right? So at boyhood, socio-emotional skills, resilience, and whether or not there's a support system or a healthy support system around him. And then in adolescence, socialization, role identity, values, psychosocial development all come into play, and how well those things are being inculcated into this developing man who's heading into fatherhood. And then certainly as men, men bring hurt and wounds into manhood from the previous stages. We bring a worldview into those stages. We have our idea about goals for ourselves. We in our society, particularly this Western society, we have this self-perception that can be combined with the man box concept, where I'm very, very limited in what I can do, what I can think, how I can react and respond to life as a man. And then the intergenerational transfer of hurt and wounds, and then their beliefs and strengths. So from a micro level, these are the things that go into the development of a father that you want to pay attention to and at least understand as you think about serving men and fathers on college campuses. Then at a macro level, there's a host of things, and I always tell the fathers that we serve, there are so many things that are not your fault, right? And so here are a host of things that fathers have no say in, right? Federal and state legislation and policies around all of these areas that directly affect how this man will be a father, how well he'll be a father, when he'll be a father, all those things. So how well he'll be able to take care of his children. So when you look at all these factors, one thing that really motivates me and has for the decades I've been a fatherhood practitioner is men with all of this from the micro to the macro level impacting their ability to father, they father on, they father through, right? So we have a deep belief in that all men want to father, all men want to really be good dads, regardless of or in concert with the micro and macro elements in their lives that have an impact on the type of fathers they can be. And so when we think about fathers, this is what we're looking at, the proximity and interaction. Where look at the baby and the father engaging each other. Something deep and old is occurring there, right? And another thing, I love Kyle Pruitt. So one of the things he points out in his book, Father Need, is that infants are primed to seek their father, right? And so when we're thinking about fathers on college campuses, we really need to think about how they're developed into the role of fatherhood. Are they able to be in proximity and interaction with their children? Because if any of these things are off kilter, they could have a negative impact on that father's ability to make it through his studies and achieve the degree that he's trying to achieve. All right, so I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Harold Howard, to take us home.
Appreciate that, Calvin. Good morning, everyone. Let me just first start off by saying I'm not that self-centered to have my own quote on a slide. So I'm gonna chalk that up to Calvin Williams putting that there. So just wanted to put that out there. As we talk about the fathers benefit most from wraparound and family engagement, really what I wanted to spend my brief time talking about is just from the fatherhood practitioner's lens. And, throughout the course of my time in the fatherhood field, what we have found to be most successful is when we engage the entire family towards helping a father achieve his outcomes or his goals within a program. Oftentimes when fathers are unsuccessful in programming, it's typically because of the challenges that they are faced with, within their family dynamics. It could be co-parenting, it could be, having to go find, employment or try to obtain, better employment. And so some things always get put on the back burner. So really what I wanted to focus a lot on is, how family systems can all come together to support fathers so that they can achieve their goals. As we think about, the wraparound and family engagement, the other component to that is when you think about, the complexities of childcare, how families can assist with, just being able to, babysit while fathers study. You think about having another advocate where things are not going so well for the father, financially or academically. How can we reach out to, families to help support his efforts in obtaining educational success? So, for us, when we talk about these benefits of wraparound family engagement, it's worth the investment. We understand that it's more work. It's more work when you got to work with the individual, with more than just the individual that you're serving. It's more work when you engage more individuals. But I think we all can agree that the end goal of the father being able to obtain some level of educational success is worth that investment to include all the family members. Next slide there, Calvin. And so when we think about the factors that support fathers staying connected to their children, what we know is, based off of, our history of serving fathers, that these things have to be in play. So positive relationships with the child's mom and maternal relatives, and other resources have to be in play. And what I can tell you is, Calvin said we work off the premise that all men want to father well. We also work off the premise that we have a small window to make a huge impact in these fathers' lives. And when, these things are not stable in the father's lives, resources, consistent support from family, mom's desire for the child or children to have a relationship with the dad, when these things are not, consistent in the father's lives, it can impact his ability to achieve any outcomes, let alone educational outcomes. And so, circling back to that small window, for us, what we try to do and what we consult programs around is, making sure that we address these immediate needs right away. Oftentimes we hear about, community symposiums or things where we're always providing information to fathers. Well, what we know that oftentimes, a father's ability to obtain information is tied to what's happening in his household, what's happening when he walks out of that classroom, what's happening when he walks out of that, that program or that entity that's providing resources throughout the community. If we're not addressing his direct needs, he's not going to be able to obtain that information. And so this correlates to education as well. The more assets, the more supports that we can provide to our fathers by eliminating any of these barriers and making sure that he's stable in these areas, the better off he's going to be as he, again, tries to obtain his educational goals. Next slide there, Calvin. And so then we talk about, factors that impede or disrupt fathers' connection to their child or children. And again, this is why identifying and engaging those support mechanisms within that family structure is key. You think about mom as gatekeeping, you think about, co-parenting relationship distress, multiple partner fertility, overwhelmed child support. These are barriers. These are barriers that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in fatherhood programming and when we're consulting fatherhood services. And so, again, once a father walks in your doors, whether it's a social service agency or higher education, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but fortunately, we have an incredible opportunity to make an impact. And what we also have to understand is that fathers are not always out here seeking help. And so when they do seek that help, when they do allow us to crack that door open and, into their lives, we have to make sure that we have resources in place to really serve these individuals. And so oftentimes, we're not set up as a singular entity to meet all of their needs. But what we can do is make sure that we understand the landscape of our community, landscape of what our fathers' needs are, and then make sure that we align ourselves with or partner with other entities in our communities to make sure that we're able to address the needs of the fathers in these particular areas. So when you think about mom as gatekeeping, how do we help fathers with access and visitation to their child or children? We think about child support. How do we get fathers well informed about the child support system? Oftentimes, what fathers think is that the system is really them against, the system is built for them not to get the assistance that they need. That's not true. The system is there for the child. And the more we can educate our fathers about their particular situation, how to, file for modifications, how to connect with their caseworker, the better off they are. Really what we're trying to get towards is sound mind so that we can focus mentally, physically, socially, and emotionally to our education or the education that our fathers are out to obtain. So next slide there, Calvin. So we think about the current roles of the expecting our parental fathers. And so they play all of these different roles: husband, father, son, student, co-parent. And this is just, few of many different roles that we know, our fathers play. Unfortunately, in our community, sometimes when we think about the roles that mom play, there's a lot of resources out in the community that helps aid her along so that she can continue to play those roles uninterrupted, as she advances and achieves stability within her own life. And so, what we're saying here is that we have to create an infrastructure where fathers can continue to play these roles uninterrupted, with support from community, with support from families, with support from others. So again, they can obtain outcomes that are withstanding and game changers and for their families. And so the key question here is, when you think about your own systems, whoever's on the call and what you represent, how is your support set up to assist fathers in these roles? And then the other question would simply be, does the support include or involve his family? And I'm not looking for, an answer right now. I know we're kind of short on time and we can't go back and forth, but, maybe that's something you can, type in the chat, where you feel your infrastructure is in supporting fathers in these different various roles as they try to achieve educational success. Next slide there, Calvin. Systems likely to be involved in father's life include, as was stated by, many others who are presented today: child support, child protection, juvenile, family court, and workforce. Unfortunately, for a lot of our fathers, they're connected to a lot of these systems. And what we have to do is lead our fathers in a way that these systems are in place to help them. And truly, our job is to educate them around these systems. When you think about child support, you think about child protection and juvenile family court. I can tell you, here in Hamilton County, we've done a lot of work over the years with our jobs and family services to really help them understand that, when kids are in child protective services, we need to be identifying the father on the front end, not identifying him once we're ready to place the child with a paternal grandmother or with a foster family. We have to be able to identify who this father is, get him involved, because as Calvin said, we know that all fathers want to parent well. And to prove it otherwise, that's just the premise that we all have to work off of. We have an incredible, stage and opportunity and the privilege of really serving these fathers. And the more we help them understand these systems, the better off they're going to be long-term. Next slide there, Calvin. So we think about community resources, for our fathers. I've been involved with the Tower. I think I'm missing a slide there, Calvin. Maybe not. That's okay. I'll keep going. I've been involved with the Tower House Fatherhood Project for a long time. And, our infrastructure around the Fatherhood Program is built, simply off the identified needs of our fathers. And so, that includes case management, that includes employment services, that include legal services, parenting classes. And so for us, we know that these things are critical to move the needle for fathers and families. And so I'm gonna shut up because we're down to like 15 minutes here and I want to be able to get to the panel discussion, but I just want to basically just say to you all, oh, okay, Calvin, I see it popping up now. That's the challenge when you're not kind of clicking on your own. So these are some of the critical components to what we think is prevalent in fatherhood development and fatherhood programming. And more importantly, you think about campus life, things that we have to be prepared to address. And again, I want to say it from a resource perspective. We know the infrastructures are not set up to directly deal with these issues, but hopefully we are bringing this to you as awareness so that you can start thinking through what resources are out there in the community that can help you in these areas. And what I can tell you is that, Lucian families obviously stand ready to assist you all as you continue to just contemplate how to create a better environment for, fathers who are coming to you all for higher education. Next slide there, Calvin. So thank you. Just wanted to show you here our Facebook and how you can reach out to us in the many different areas. My goal was to stop right at 11:15 because we can at least leave 15 minutes for questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, Louis.
Wow, thank you both so much for that presentation. We have been just receiving some great, not just information, but also inspiration from all of the presenters that have gone so far. I'm going to invite everybody back to our virtual stage. Mr. David Llewellyn, Mr. Calvin Williams, and at this time we want to also from Fathers Incorporated, Mr. Lawrence Wilbon as well. Mr. Lawrence Wilbon as well. We want to respect your time, so we are going to make sure that we end at the 11:30 to go ahead and turn their camera on, turn their microphone on. Go ahead and address some of these questions here. One of the questions that was presented from the attendees is this: how do each of these three programs recruit fathers to be a part of their programs? And also attached to that question was, do you incentivize fathers to come? And if so, how? I'm going to pose that to everyone. I'm going to ask Mr. Lawrence Wilbon, since you we want to hear from you. So can you take a stab at that question first, and then everyone else can come after that? Once again, the question is, how do each of these programs recruit fathers to be a part of their programs? And do you incentivize fathers to come? And if so, how? Mr. Wilbon, can you answer that question for us?
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation again. Thank you for the coordinators of this platform, and to my wife, who did an excellent job of presenting the blueprint, and then my other fellow brothers that are on here. I just wanted to throw one pin in. I am an Ohio State alum. I just want to make sure everybody understands that I do have roots, born and raised in Ohio, and met my wife at Ohio State, and so the rest is history. But real quick, so Fathers Incorporated does a couple of things. We assist, we actually do recruit fathers through referrals through our partners that we work with. We've created a network of partners that refer men into our programs. In addition to that, we have some robust marketing campaigns. One of the marketing campaigns we have right now is called Fatherhood Is Brotherhood. And with this campaign, our goal is to not just talk about the importance of fatherhood, but we're talking about the importance of being a group and a part of this brotherhood where there's accountability. And so this marketing campaign has been very successful and directing men into our program. So with our partners, our marketing campaign, and then we still do old-fashioned outreach. And so we attend different events throughout the city to make sure that fathers are engaged in our programs. As far as participating in our programs and receiving incentives, depending on the program you're in, there is an incentive attached to the program. And so we look at incentives and ways it's going to help benefit the entire family. So we look at, diapers. We look at providing diapers and wipes. We look at being able to provide assistance if a family is in need, where we're able to kind of help incentivize them with any kind of utility services and things like that. So we look at incentives as a way just to help push the family to the next level versus just getting them in the door and keeping them in the door. But that's the way that we look at a recruitment and incentives.
Great. Thank you for that. There's actual several questions connected to recruiting fathers and getting fathers to be a part of their organization. So I'm going to ask Mr. Flewellen or Mr. Howard or Mr. Williams as well. Can you talk specifically about your organization and how or if you all recruit fathers, and how can some of those who are watching, who are tuning in, who may be even watching the playback, what can they do to recruit fathers to be a part of what they're doing on their campus or within their organization?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go just for, so I'll speak from the Tower House Fatherhood Project. Lens, that program has been around for over 22 years and serves well over 500 dads a year. And a lot of that has just been, organic growth, working. And I think that the main thing that, really helps with recruiting is case management. Case management is centralized to everything we do. We have to be able to address fathers' needs, again, for them to be able to, attain and retain information. And so, addressing those needs, and fathers getting their needs met, they go out and they tell other fathers about the program. And then what we do is, again, understanding the landscape of the community, we see what, some of the major gaps or barriers our fathers have. What we then try to do is partner with those entities. So juvenile court, domestic relations court, child support, employment, certification programs, things of that nature. Co-parenting, co-parenting is something that, Lucian Families is very, popular in this area and rendering to fathers and families, because those are the needs, right? And so, and we understand that that's ever changing. So you think about, because of the pandemic, now what we're doing more of is connecting fathers to, rental assistance and mortgage assistance and things of that nature. So really just understanding that dynamic and really then working within, all the social service entities. Is we're not in competition, collectively, we do a better job serving our fathers and families. So we've done a lot of work in those areas. And so we all work together to make sure that when fathers have a need, we work collectively to get to really help them get the, get what they need.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm going to throw this question over to Mr. David Flewellen. There's a question here that talks about if the parenting program, if it supports both mom and dad, mothers and fathers, in your opinion, should the programming take place separately, as far as maybe they come together and then they break out with mom over here, dad? In your opinion, should it operate together or a mixture of both? What would be your suggestion on that, Mr. Flewellen, about the parenting program? Mom and dad together, separate, or a mixture of both?
You muted, my brother.
Somebody had to do it today, right? So, like, we couldn't have had a virtual meeting without somebody talking on mute. If I could just briefly touch on the recruitment and incentive really quick. We have a host of partnerships throughout Franklin County. We get recruitments from the Wexner Medical Center. We get recruitment from, of course, the hospital, Wexner Medical Center. WIC, Celebrate One is a big recruitment, primarily because of our family approach, right? So we're not just working with a dad or a mom, and the mom being pregnant as well. When you start talking about incentives, All of our families get a $5 incentive every time that they come. They also receive additional resources and supplies as needed. So formula, wipes, diapers, the whole nine. One of the things I'm really excited about that at the birth of every one of our babies, each one of our dads receive what we call a welcome to the world bag. And so this is a diaper bag for dad. It's not pink, it's not purple, but it's a manly diaper bag with his own stuff in it, so that he could properly care for his child. And so we're really excited about that. Should mom and dads receive programming together? Absolutely. I tell our team all the time, Lewis can testify to this, have them. They want to be together. They want to have a strong, healthy family, at least while they're with us. We have to capitalize on that. These families come from urban, inner city, underserved communities where families, unfortunately, the family structure is not what it used to be. I grew up on a block where everybody knew everybody. You know, Miss Josephine on the corner, Miss Alexander across the street. It was a family-orientated community. That's unfortunately not what we see today. And so because we have the opportunity, if you have an opportunity to work with a mom and dad together, it is my belief that you have to capitalize on that. Now, you do have to mix it up because some stuff mom won't talk about with dad there. Some stuff dad won't talk about with mom in the same room. And so you want to be able to provide space and opportunities for mom and dad to be able to share and talk about things that they might not be comfortable talking about in front of their partner, and then strategically come back together and address those issues if deemed necessary. But I think that it's a mixture of both. I think it's power in having a mom and dad together in the same space at the same time, getting the same information. We want to give them, because mom can get information over here at this program, dad give information over here, they come back home, well, my program said this, they said this over at my program. Nah, we don't do that. We give you the same information, and you should see the looks on some of these faces when we're saying something that one of the mom or the dad said at home, and we're now validating what they said. They like, I was trying to tell him that. And so it is just amazing to be able to provide moms and dads, at least for us. And I think I can speak for some of our other practitioners as well. We predominantly work with urban inner city families. It's power in that. It's power in being able to work with mom and dad together.
Thank you so much for that. The hour is 11:26. So we're going to get to one more question, and we are going to invite Mr. Wilbon on the panel during the presentations. Here's another question, and I'm going to ask for a 2-minute response, and then we will give our final words and be done at 11:30. It says, if mentorship is centered on a career or professional experience, so if we're dealing with mentoring dad, and I believe that's a big piece, that could be a whole nother 2-hour conversation, the power and need of mentorship. Should the mentor also be a father? So if it is a career or professional experience mentor, does that particular mentor, in your expertise, Mr. Wilbon, would you suggest for him to be a father as well?
In my opinion, I definitely think you can learn some of the techniques of parenting from textbooks and from being around other folks that are teaching it. But I really feel like the real meaning and the weight behind parenting comes from those that can have some of those same war wounds. And so I could speak in my earlier career of being a great parent, teaching classes, but it wasn't until I started with my own children, and now I'm able to actually put some of those practices in place. But then I'm able to add some editorial behind it too, because I'm actually dealing with it myself. So I would say that you can facilitate any class or mentor someone in the form of parenting. But I really think the true tried and true piece, the believable heroes, are those that are actually parents.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm going to give another one of our panelists a 30-second slot, a 30-second slot to add anything that you would like to do as far as mentorship, should that mentor be a father as well.
I'm going to jump in here and say absolutely. I think that there's so much that you can learn in general in regards to manhood. Another man could teach you how to be a man, how to carry yourself, how to conduct yourself. I'm going to use me as an example. I've been in the fatherhood space in regards to infant mortality education and prenatal education for 6 years. I just had a baby myself in February. Total different look on the pregnancy, the hospital experience, the birthing process. Total different look now after having taught and being around children than I did before. And so I actually I was practicing what I've been preaching. And so much more value in having experienced it yourself and being able to relate as a father to say, you know what, man, I dealt with that. This is something that works for me as a father. These are some strategies and techniques that I've used to be the best father possible. So I'll say, I agree with Dr. Wilbon or Mr. Wilbon. There's some stuff absolutely you could teach man to man, but father to father is probably going to be your best move.
Wow, thank you so much for those answers, for those information. Thank you so much to each and to all of those who have attended together on today. This portion of the symposium was entitled Supporting Fathering Students. We hope that something was said to inspire you, to uplift you, to inform you on how you can better equip your staff, your university, your college, whatever it may be, to support fathers who are going onward in their education. I hope that you all have a phenomenal rest of the day. This is a 2-day event. There's more sessions going on later today and tomorrow. Please go to the website through some of the sessions that are going on and then enter each one that you think would be a benefit for you. I believe there is an hour lunch break at this time, so get you something good to eat, and we look forward to seeing you back at the next session at the 12:30 hour. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.